Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Payment Strategy Show. I'm Joshua Stover, founder and CEO of Rainforest. We help vertical SaaS platforms embed payment processing into their core product to grow revenue and increase customer retention. I'm here today with Becky Kopplin. We field a lot of questions about surcharging and compliance, so today's episode is a deep dive into that topic. As VP of Payments at Rainforest, Becky oversees platform success, payment operations, support, and risk. She understands card brand rules and how to stay on the right side of them. Becky, thanks so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
All right, well, let's start with an easy one. What is surcharging and how is it different from a convenience fee or a technology fee?
I think at its simplest form, surcharging is any kind of volume-based or percentage-based fee that's charged on a card payment. The card brands don't really care what you call it. So if you decide to use the word convenience fee to describe it, it doesn't really change it fundamentally. We're really just talking about a volume-based fee. So the language there between surcharging and convenience isn't super meaningful. A technology fee can be something a little different. For example, if you're charging for the convenience of a channel, then you could refer to it as a technology fee. And there's some rules there that might apply between the two. But effectively, the way that would work is if you pay through this technology channel, the fee applies, but there then is a way to not, to purchase or make the payment outside of that technology channel. And that kind of puts it into a little bit of a different bucket.
If a technology fee, though, is percentage-based, would Visa still consider that a surcharge?
It's possible. It depends on how clear the lines are. So effectively, you'd have to be consistent with that message. So if I'm charging for the technology fee, then all payment methods through that technology channel would need to be billed and the same way. Playing this out a little bit, if you have the ability to purchase in person and online, and you charge for your online technology channel, then you would charge for all payment methods through that channel, including ACH. And then you would not charge any fee to pay in person, even if it was for card. So that starts to create that delineation between this is for that technology channel and this is not. Now, Visa still may come in and say, or some other card brand, or even a state, which we'll get into state rules. They may come in and say that still applies, but effectively that technology message needs to be consistent.
Gotcha.
One other thing that gets pulled into here, because as we're laying the groundwork, is this concept of discounting. What that looks like is, hey, the price is $100, but if you follow these rules, the price is actually $97. This is a way of effectively kind of negative surcharging.
Right.
Okay for most places, as long as the price listed is the price with the surcharge, not the 97 and then you see $100 at checkout. You see $100 and then you see an option to pay that is $97 at checkout. So there's kind of one extra nuance there.
Got it. Now, you talk a lot about Visa. Obviously, there's 4 major card brands in the US. Any reason you're focusing specifically on Visa's rules versus, say, MasterCard or Discover or American Express?
Sure. Part of the reason is they're the largest card brand and their rules are fairly clear and restrictive. Also, Visa has made a point recently to do a lot of auditing and even secret shopping around this. So this is a point of focus for Visa recently, is to really help ensure that the surcharging rules are being followed. Because to be clear, there's a lot of people that are not following them. And so we generally kind of looking at Visa rules and kind of look at 2 sets of rules. Visa rules and state laws, and that's really where our focus is.
Yeah, and of course, unlike in a store where a secret shopper actually has to go in person and it's pretty hard to do at scale, with online checkouts, a secret shopper, I use secret shopper in air quotes, of course, can be as simple as visiting the website, putting some items in the basket and seeing what the price would be with different payment methods. And so it is actually reasonable and feasible for the card brands to do this and, potentially even using some technology to help do that at scale. So it is a real concern.
They also have kind of a self-reporting element that comes into play. So cardholders will complain to issuers. And so there are a couple channels of ways for Visa to get a heads up that there's something happening. Absolutely, to your point, with as much online business is happening, it's pretty easy for Visa to be doing these secret shopping.
And Becky, what are the consequences of breaking the card brand rules around this?
So there definitely an opportunity for fines and fees. And ultimately, though, you could be removed from the card brand network, which for most merchants is kind of a death sentence. And so you could ultimately be kicked out. So it's fairly serious. What we've seen is you generally get kind of an opportunity to address that concern. You normally get kind of a please remediate letter first, but there's no requirements for that to be the first step. So they really could just jump to fines and ultimately removal from the network.
Understood. So let's talk about how to do this the right way versus
Yeah.
focusing on negative consequences. So if a software platform did want to enable surcharging for their merchants, what are the things they would need to get right in order to comply with, say, Visa's surcharging rules?
Sure. And the rules are public, and there's a handful of them, and definitely recommend anybody to do this to go look at those. But Visa's made it really clear that there's kind of three most important elements that need to be present in a compliant surcharging program. So thinking a little bit more about how software platform might address this. The first would be a bin lookup table. This allows you to delineate by card type. So we can dive into that one. It needs to be a cap on what the surcharge can be. That needs to be 3% or the amount of the merchant billing, whichever's lower, and then the ability to block merchant by location. So these three are the ones that Visa looks at the most to say, hey, if you have a compliant surcharging program, it includes these three elements.
Got it. So three main rules to keep in mind. Let's unpack them one at a time. Tell me a little bit more about what a bin lookup is and why is that important?
Sure. So the first 6 or 8 digits of the card is the BIN. This identifies the issuing bank and the type of card it is, whether it's a debit or credit or World Elite or whatever that looks like. The surcharging rules require that you do not surcharge debit cards specifically. And so what you want to do is be able to have a way on page to limit that. It's you want to be able to, as the card is being entered in that first 6 or 8 digits, know that that's a debit card and the surcharging then does not apply. And then for credit cards, it can. So that bin lookup in real time allows you to create a real frictionless experience. So as you enter the card, right, you're seeing the right amount of charge that should apply to that card.
Gotcha.
To go a bit deeper into that, when you're thinking about a bin lookup tool, you really want to think embedded and within kind of your checkout component. And there's kind of two big reasons for that. One is real time. What you don't want to do is create a lot of delays or any sort of redirect or anything that might create abandonment or friction in the checkout process. And two, if you have a multi-stage process, you could potentially have PCI exposure in a way you weren't anticipating because you've got really kind of a full card number that's sitting there. And the ability to kind of creatively pull out 6 or 8 digits and run them to another service while it's sitting there. Really kind of the ideal solution here is a bin lookup tool should be embedded within your hosted checkout component, creating the most secure and frictionless experience.
Got it. So if I pulled out my wallet, let's say I bank with JP Morgan Chase, and I have a Chase debit card and I have a Chase Sapphire Reserve card, we're saying the first 6 or 8 digits of those are going to be different, even though it's the same bank. And then we know based on those, one is a debit, one is a credit card, and we can surcharge the credit card. We cannot do so on the debit card.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the first rule is we need to do that bin lookup, make sure we're not surcharging debit cards under any circumstances. Tell me about the 3% cap and where does that come into play?
Sure. Visa has ruled that there needs to be limits on what you can surcharge. And so they've determined that it's 3% or what the merchant pays for processing. Effectively, what they want to do is make sure that this isn't a profitability point for the merchant, and that there's no way to kind of game the system by saying, hey, I charge my merchants 10% and therefore it's 10%. So it puts it in a reasonable range. We recommend here that if you're going to do surcharging, you just set it at 3% for the merchant fee as well. And now there's no confusion. And so what you're looking for is effectively the merchant isn't profiting from it and you're not going over 3%.
Got it. Okay. And then the last one you talk about is the ability to block merchants by location. Why is this important?
Some states have rules about surcharging and specifically have prohibited surcharging in their state. That is based on the merchant location, not the cardholder location. And so in order to be the most compliant, we would recommend, especially if you've got large nationwide volume, to go seek out an attorney And then you can potentially navigate individual states that have rules that you might still be able to do surcharging under certain circumstances. And note that these are changing all of the time, and states
Mhm.
are kind of constantly reviewing this. The simplest way to make sure that you're not getting sideways with state laws is when there is any sort of prohibit in place by state law, is to just remove that merchant from the program. And that becomes a really easy way to do that without investing a lot of time in legal fees there. Obviously, again, if there's material volume nationwide, then definitely recommend getting an attorney involved in that. But for a compliant program, Visa is going to want to see that you have the ability to adhere to state laws, and just not allowing those in some of those trickier states is a great path forward.
Got it. All right. Well, clearly the decision to enable surcharging is not a trivial one. You have the development cost of building it out, all the ongoing compliance, we talked about that. But even on top of that, consumers generally don't like surcharging, right? If I'm checking out somewhere and all of a sudden I have to pay more than I thought I was going to, it's going to add friction, maybe dissatisfaction. At the same time, you may make the merchants happy. And so how do you think a platform should approach the decision of whether or not to surcharge, and how to balance the needs and the benefits of all those stakeholders?
Yeah. We like to think about these things into kind of two categories and split by kind of expectations of the cardholders and the merchants. So, in the first one, where card adoption is already prevalent, consumers have an expectation to pay with card, they're relatively low ticket. They're really going to be surprised when they see a processing fee at checkout. Think like retail, healthcare, some of these places where people are just already expecting to be able to pay with card. And in those cases, we see a lot more friction, right? Because if you're going to, check out at your favorite retailer, and then all of a sudden there's this brand new fee that I've never seen before, and I'm accustomed to buying this service on a card, right? That's a place where I think you want to be really sensitive to whether that makes sense. In the other end of things, really kind of what you're looking for is merchant industries where adoption is low today. So merchants aren't accustomed to that fee, and it does feel like an additional new benefit to cardholders. So real high ticket, B2B, other kind of emerging market areas. In those cases, surcharging can make a lot of sense, because what you're doing is getting the merchant comfortable with this payment, and your payers aren't already accustomed to it. So I see my standard way that I always pay, right? This high ticket B2B transaction, but now I see this new benefit, and I'm willing to pay a premium potentially for this new benefit.
So, Becky, isn't that how the card networks got adoption in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, kind of the original interchange rate, so for payment history nerds, electric interchange reimbursement fee was actually a payment to the merchant for accepting the card. And that's how they originally were to get merchants on board with moving from what they were doing at the time, which is check and cash, and accept this new requirement that came with, I think that at that time we're still talking knuckle busters and this additional equipment and fees. So that's how it all started, was get the merchant on board until you become a part of their normal cost of business, and establish kind of that expectation with payers that they can use a card at this location or with this industry.
Yeah, fascinating history trying to build that two-sided market where you need consumers that have cards, but you also need merchants that are willing to accept them. Really hard to bootstrap that market, but clearly Visa and MasterCard were able to do it.
Yeah, and I would add kind of a secret sub third category, which is sometimes optionality makes sense. And we see this really frequently in donations, where
Yep.
you can give the donor the ability to cover costs because they want to. Like, this is a part of their gift, is being able to cover those fees. And you make kind of an optional surcharging.
All right, so clearly a tough decision. Some industries may make sense, others not so much. Becky, any closing thoughts on surcharging as our listeners are trying to figure out what to do for next steps?
Sure. I think the first thing I would say is, if you're thinking about surcharging because you're getting merchant pressure on pricing, surcharging may not be the answer there. I think some platforms are imagining, if I can offset my merchant fees, now I don't have that same kind of pricing pressure. And I would be very cautious in this area because there could be unintended consequences for surcharging, additional buyer friction, which could lead to abandonment, and driving payers to a less profitable payment method like ACH. And so in those cases, I would kind of maybe take a step back and think about, is there a larger something here to solve with my value proposition, with my product? Why am I getting the kind of price pressure? Because what we see is when you have a great end-to-end solution for a vertical segment, you don't always have the same kind of pricing pressure you might have if there's product gaps or payments isn't as embedded as you might want it to be. So kind of lesson number one is this is not a solution for merchant price pressure in a lot of cases. And so kind of that would be one thing. And the other is if your merchants, if this is kind of a brand new segment for merchants for card, think really heavy ACH, this could be a fantastic offering. And so I think I would, in all cases, before you think about surcharging, really take the time to understand what your motivation is, what your merchant's motivations are, what your buyer expectations are. And in no scenario should this be seen as a real easy button to press and all of a sudden nobody cares about pricing, because I don't think we've ever really seen it work that way.
Thank you so much, Becky, for being with us. Clearly a complex topic, but appreciate you unraveling the mysteries of surcharging. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you.